Congressman Andy Ogles from the 5th is joining us here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Congressman, always great to have you on. Earlier, Congressman, we had Congressman Scott Desjardins on the radio program. And, of course, this whole conversation regarding Section 702 is what we're talking about, and FISA. Now, Congressman, you were one of 19 who decided to basically not allow the discussion down on the House floor. There were 56 reforms to FISA that they wanted to talk about. But you folks, you and Congressman Tim Burchett and others did not get the one reform that you wanted. I want to play an audio bite for you from Congressman Scott Desjardins. This is what he said on WTN just moments ago.
To me, it's about situational awareness. You're not going to get everything you want. There's a group of people here that think, if they can't get their idea or their amendment, then nobody gets to vote on any amendments. And unfortunately, you got to realize you don't have to compromise your principle, but you got to change your strategy. And when you're a slim majority like we are up here, we've got to work together as a team. And so it's kind of frustrating.
So this is all about 702, and let's talk about the amendment or the reform that you folks were not able to get into the legislation.
Yeah, no, and certainly love Desjardins and appreciate his perspective. But, what you got to understand is in 2021, there was 3.3 million inquiries on American citizens. And so FISA is meant to be used to spy on foreigners. But over 3 million Americans were spied on, and there was inquiries and some of them were because they were Catholic, because they were Republican, because they were conservative. You had individuals that had access to the network that were spying on ex-girlfriends and things like this, and there's a loophole there that's got to be closed, and it's being weaponized against the American people. But the other thing is the quote-unquote reforms that were in this bill that were being proposed, they all had waiver provisions. And so this idea that, we're going to trust the government that has weaponized itself against Donald Trump, that did inquiries on 3 million Americans, is absolutely nonsensical. And here's the other thing, is your data is for sale. And so what the government and certain agencies have been doing is simply buying your data, buying your search history, buying your cell phone records and things of that nature that otherwise they would need a warrant to get. And so it's very problematic. And so what we did was simply say, look, and here's the other thing is the committee of jurisdiction is judiciary, and judiciary overwhelmingly voted out the warrant provision and the your data is not for sale provisions. And so this was an end run around Warren Davidson. It was an end run around Jim Jordan. And so we stood up and said, look, we're going to block this. We're going to reforce this conversation. And all we're asking is bring those amendments to the floor, the actual amendments that would truly protect Americans' information. And if they fail, they fail. But that is the process as it should be, and so that's what we fought for.
And so your biggest issue with the legislation was that it did not tackle the problem where Americans, and you just mentioned it, millions of Americans caught up in this foreign surveillance, and then the FBI can go in without a warrant and get access to that information on American citizens. Embedded in these reforms, is it possible, Congressman, and I don't know, obviously, because I'm just reading the news, you're looking at all of this stuff, would that problem or issue have been handled within some of these other reforms that were included in the legislation?
Well, unfortunately, no, because again, there's all these waiver provisions in there where simply, and so
Congressman, what is a waiver provision?
Basically, if the director of the FBI or whomever is granted said authority decides that, well, you know what, we really want to see what Dan Mandis is up to, we're just going to waive that provision of the law, and we're going to do it anyway. And the problem is with those types of waivers, we've seen them abused. And so you're writing a piece of legislation that sounds good, that historically has already been weaponized against the American people, isn't doing anything. And that's the problem with Washington. All of these folks go up there and they campaign. They're going to be tough. They're going to fight for Americans. They're going to fight for liberty. And then when they have the opportunity to hold the line and look, we do have a slim majority, but overwhelmingly the reforms that we wanted would have passed on the House floor. That's why they pulled it, 2 weeks ago. We were supposed to be voting on this. Jim Jordan had laid out the plan because he is the committee chairman of jurisdiction. He had a plan, and he said, look, if the Intel Committee has other amendments that they want to bring, amendments that are perhaps contrary to his amendments, let them bring them to the House floor, let the body vote on it. And when it was clear that the judiciary amendments were going to pass, when it was clear that we were going to actually stop the spying on Americans, suddenly there was a panic by the intelligence community. They came down hard on leadership, and suddenly, we're going to pause this and we're going to regroup and we'll bring it back after the recess. And so that's what's really going on behind the curtain. And look, I went up there to fight for our freedom and liberty, and I'm not going to back down because some defense contractor or some other group is saying, well, we really want the right to spy on you. Like, no. I don't. We have a Fourth Amendment for a reason. The police can't just come into your home because they want to. They have to prove probable cause. Well, under FISA, they don't need probable cause.
I think, is it part of the problem here, Congressman Andy Ogles joining us? I want to play you a piece of audio from Christopher Wray, FBI director.
702 allows us to stay a step ahead of foreign actors located outside the United States who pose a threat to national security. And the expiration of our 702 authorities would be devastating to the FBI's ability to protect Americans from those threats.
One of the things I think that you and Congressman Desjardins agree on is that regardless of what Christopher Wray says, and he is right, by the way, on some of that stuff, but I mean, you can't trust the FBI. I mean, and you just simply can't. And no matter what they say and no matter what they promise, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about, and I have that in my notes, the millions of times that they have gone after Americans' information outside of the guardrails and the guidelines that we already have. We already know, of course, that they went after Donald Trump as well, and the former president posting on social media yesterday that he wanted FISA killed. Congressman, the problem is that nobody can trust the FBI.
Well, I mean, again, you said it before the break, is in 2016, the FISA was used to spy on the Donald Trump campaign. And so when you put it in that context, that this was a politically motivated operation weaponized against someone running for president of the United States, are we going to trust the intelligence community going forward after they did, such an egregious act against Donald Trump? Look, you can like Donald Trump, you can not like Donald Trump, but the fact that they spied on an individual and his campaign apparatus for political reasons, that is a problem in this country. It is a loophole that has to be closed. And that's all we're trying to do here. And look, like you said, Donald Trump came out and said, look, it was used to spy against me. You guys have to kill this thing. And there were some simple provisions. I was actively talking to the speaker. I have a whole text thread with him. It was a 5-year authorization. Well, we could have done a shorter 1 or 2 year authorization, kicking the other reauthorization or another authorization to Donald Trump. And so we could have crafted it when you had both the Republican House and Senate and then ultimately the White House. But what we're trying to do here is craft it under a Biden administration that spied on Donald Trump, that doesn't want Donald Trump to be president of the United States. Do you trust that the FBI is not going to spy on Donald Trump again? Do you truly think that there's not going to be some sort of new Russiagate or something like that? They've done it once. Behaviors or predictability of future actions. And so this is the problem we have with this FISA bill, is that we've got to stop it. We've got to reform it, and a short-term reauthorization with a warrant provision would go a long way to protect you and me and everyone else in this country from a weaponized Department of Justice.
Did Speaker Johnson say why he didn't want to include this sort of this narrow, maybe the wrong word, but this specific reform in this legislation, if, as you say, it would have passed the House vote? Was it because the intelligence community freaked out?
Well, Mike's a great guy. He truly believes that FISA is necessary. And when it comes to catching foreigners who want to do harm against us, I think that was its intent, and that's how it should be used, so that you don't have another 9/11. You don't have individuals from foreign countries coming here, spying on us, doing nefarious things. That's what FISA is meant to be used for, not because someone's Catholic. not because someone is conservative, not because someone is going to win an election and it's trying to be blocked by some other group. That's the problem here. And so I think, and it should be noted, Mike Johnson, when he was on Judiciary before he was Speaker of the House, voted for the warrant provision. He spoke eloquently as to why we needed a warrant provision. Then, unfortunately, fortunately, he becomes Speaker. But that being said, unfortunately, he was against the warrant provision, or at least letting it move forward. And, we're in negotiations. I'm literally about to go to a meeting right now as we're going to talk about this to see what our next steps are in getting the warrant provision on there, or at least getting it a fair vote, so that the American people are protected as we go forward.
All right. So how do you move forward with that? How does that conversation go?
Well, I think part of it is, figuring out what everybody needs to see this move forward. Because of our timeline, you could see a suspension of the rules, which requires 2/3 majority. And I think that's achievable. But it'll take some work this morning. We'll be working hard on it. And I do see us moving forward. And look, a clean authorization, which would not have some of the provisions in it that the intelligence community wanted, it would actually be better. So even if we can't get the warrant provision, having it clean and shorter would be better than what the intelligence community was asking for on behalf of the FBI. So there's a win-win here. What we're hoping for is we can get the warrant provision in there.
So do you have any bold predictions as to what's going to happen?
I don't actually. We were up late last night working on this, whipping votes to figuring out, what's that baseline that everybody can accept. Because at the end of the day, it's you that is ultimately going to feel this at some point, because they're querying you. I mean, again, go back to 2021. You're telling me 3 million Americans it's 3.3, were caught up in, were conducting terrorist activity with someone in Qatar or Iran? No, absolutely not. And we now know, as we've gone back through there, the categories that they were looking at and how they were classifying people, and it was abused. I talked to someone who was a Navy SEAL commander. He was at the highest operations of intelligence in Europe, and he said, "Look, I've seen it firsthand, the abuses of FISA. You guys have to do something, and beg, like, go fight, win, because I've seen it firsthand how this was weaponized against our own people."
All right. Well, thank you very much, Congressman Andy Ogles, joining us here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Good luck today. I know it's going to be an interesting 24 hours, and we'll all be watching, but appreciate what you're doing in Washington, D.C. 721 on Nashville's Morning News. So you heard from Congressman Scott Desjardins. You just heard from Congressman Andy Ogles, both sides of the argument. And what do you think? The Members Nutrition Super Text line is open at 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. I think the bottom line is that, for me, we simply cannot trust the FBI. You just can't. And I don't know what they need to do. Maybe I should have asked the congressman this, but I'm out of time. But my question would be, how does the FBI get that trust back? Because they abused this regarding the folks involved in January 6th. They abused this when it came to spying on Donald Trump and his campaign. They have abused this, as the congressman says, millions of times. And by the way, that's not a talking point. That comes from the Inspector General. That's where those numbers come from. So if the FBI keeps doing this, and let me tell you something, friends, if you don't think the FBI, and for me, I understand that a lot of people believe the FBI does go to work. I believe the FBI does go to work. I really do. So I'm not sitting here just bagging on the FBI, but the truth of the matter is that they have been caught abusing 702 for a long time. And so I don't know how the FBI gets that trust back, but I'm also painfully aware that we are, thanks to Joe Biden, we are right now extremely vulnerable. And so when you have all of these people coming across our southern border, when you have all of these folks on the terrorist watch lists and all of these things happening, Iran getting ready to attack Israel, we've got the situation with China and Taiwan, we've got Vladimir Putin, of course, the invasion of Ukraine continues. All of this is going on. And even though we're here in America, the attacks are being planned. And so I do understand that we need to be cognizant that those attacks are being planned, and we need to find out through intelligence what could happen. Because let's face it, stuff can happen. And so I'm just going to be honest. I don't know what the answer is, because I recognize the importance of intelligence, but I also recognize that when you have an onerous FBI and an onerous federal government that is spying on American citizens, that's not something that we can tolerate.